2023, and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Neota Ibe.
From Lagos, good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
Just in case you missed that part, it's April the 13th. Yeah, a beautiful morning right here in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. Welcome to the breakfast show, Sunrise Daily. Well, seeing the stories that broke yesterday, particularly one in Lagos, doesn't quite make the morning really beautiful when you look at it from that angle. And I'm talking about the building that collapsed on Banana Island. Now, that shocked a lot of people on different levels. One, Banana Island is one of the choicest real estate areas in Lagos, with the cost of a plot of land going for at least $1 million. That's what, over 700 million naira. And then you see that 7-story building collapsing just a few minutes to 5 p.m. yesterday. It was a shocker, really. And then you see that the video, very, just see how the building came down. I saw that video, and it just hit me on different levels. One, it could have been anyone in that building, workers, people going for inspection. I mean, it could have been someone shooting a music video or a movie, for example. I mean, you know how some of these areas are used as sets for some of these projects. It could have been anyone. It could have been me or you. It could have been a government representative, a government official, someone in government going for an inspection. It could have been anybody. And that building came down like a pack of cats, just like that. You will not expect this to happen. I mean, we've had building collapses in different areas in Lagos, but this happening on Banana Island, and seeing that the Lagos State Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development described this building as an unapproved 7-story building raises even more questions, because you ask, how did the building, unapproved as it was described, start from the foundation level to the ground floor, the first floor, second, third, all the way to the seventh? I mean, it raises lots of questions. I think that for me alone is enough reason to, I don't know really, because this is not the first time we've had this. I mean, we had one that was really devastating, and there was this panel that was raised. There was lots of investigation into it, papers released, and you thought that even for those areas where you have, you know, the so-called, you know, the rich staying, you'd expect that this will not happen, but there it is happening. So a lot of questions. First, for the Lagos State Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development, how did this building continue up until the 7th story? And you say it was unapproved. For those in charge of ensuring that the materials used are the right kind of materials, the quality of the materials, what kind of role did you play in all of this? I think this is not a time to start trying to say, well, we didn't give the approval and they continued building. That's why government is there. If anybody flouts the rule, then they need to be arrested. They need to be clamped down upon. Don't tell us that it's an area where rich people stay. Does that mean they're above the law? Certainly not, or at least that shouldn't be the case. So we need the answers. How did that building get up until 7th story? We understand that people were rescued unhurt, but there's still questions about whether or not there might be people under that rubble. 7th story. That's not a joke.
And you know, Kayode, just watching that eyewitness video, you know, it doesn't reduce the shock for anyone.
Yeah.
And take note that the person who recorded it got a back-end view of, you know, how the building collapsed. You know, it would have been, you know, a stronger, you know, effect on the person watching if it had gotten a closer view, you know, perhaps from the front end on how it went down. But it's no less of a shock. See, as you said, borrowing your words, it came down like a pack of cards. But it's a pleasant thing to note that, you know, there's no life that has been recorded lost so far. About 4 people have been rescued so far, but 1 person is still said to be trapped beneath the rubble of the collapsed building. And it came down while workers, it always happens with the stories about collapsed buildings, while workers were on site. I think they were on the 6th floor, according to the account, trying to, you know, begin the process of putting the 7th floor together when it went down. And it's sad that there are other buildings, in the surroundings, just close to that, that are also, there are questions about those buildings. Now, will the relevant government agencies also look into those and ensure that, perhaps they're complying with building regulations? It shows that, this building collapse, relevant government agencies, perhaps of the Lagos State government, may not have been monitoring to ensure compliance of the developer. So this is heartbreaking, really. Yeah. It's just another story, just another account of a collapsed building. Remember the Ikoyi building collapse of a 15-story building. Yeah. And there are other buildings, I think 3 or so that the court ruled that should also be demolished.
They pulled down.
But there's a court action restraining the Lagos State government from demolishing those buildings, and the Lagos State government has not been able to do anything about that. But then again, we must also bring the people to account. Yeah. Where building collapses are concerned. Somewhere in the Ebute-Metta area of Lagos, sometime last year, a building went down. The story is that there are other buildings that have been marked for demolition, but the people there have refused, to move from that building, to evacuate. So, in fact, there's a video online too, where the people are stationed there vehemently. They refuse to...
Saying they're not moving.
They say they're not moving.
And you see, there are other buildings around the one that collapsed, buildings still under construction. Naturally, there'll be questions raised about the integrity of those buildings. That's, of course, after the collapse. But before that, the quality of the building as well. Some of them look like they're 6, 7-story buildings, and they're right there. I mean, yes, it's never too late to do these things, but we could have avoided this in the very first place.
And we should ask questions, of the regulators, of the Society of Engineers as well. What do they do to bring those who practice less than the standards? Yeah. What do they do to bring them to book? They hold press conferences after such building collapses, distancing themselves from such practitioners. But how do they check the excesses or the substandard practice of such practitioners? These are questions that we should ask also of the regulators and practitioners in the industry, because Indeed. Those who practice, who are developing such buildings, they're registered. They seem to be professionals in the business. So we should ask questions of the regulators as well.
Absolutely, and these are big projects, millions of dollars invested into this project. Neota, I know that Abuja has seen some building collapse as well, but it looks like it's quite persistent in Lagos.
It's not a very good story when you hear about or see buildings collapsing. I mean, when I saw that video yesterday, it broke my heart. I actually thought it was a movie. I thought it was like, when they say, okay, they're trying to do a construction somewhere and they want to demolish buildings. There's something called controlled demolition. So you find the place explosives in certain places and you just see the building going down. Indeed, it looked as if it was planned. And that brings to mind, how could this happen? Yes, indeed. Who gave the approval for this design? But Kayode and Bukola, I'm sure many of us never realized that in this country, there are a lot of people that may never know that there is a building collapse prevention guild that's been monitoring how many buildings have collapsed across Nigeria since 1974, for instance. A total of 541 recorded cases of collapsed buildings between 1974 and 2022. It's shocking that these kinds of things continue to happen. And meanwhile, as Bukola, you had mentioned earlier, there are authorities that are supposed to approve every building design. They're supposed to approve the location, approve the materials that are being used for this building. Who are those people that stamp these things? Look, if I actually went back to check through the records of the Building Collapse Prevention Guild and find out exactly some of the things they had found as causing this collapse. Amongst them, the most important, number one, is professional ineptitude. And under professional ineptitude, you see things like overloading, substandard materials being used, faulty designs. I mean, somebody did not check the designs before giving that approval. poor workmanship, there's a weak foundation, and there's supposed to be development control officials around this country in the ministries, government officials who are supposed to go around checking these buildings. And then you also find out that there are some, indeed you mentioned some that the people do not want to leave, old buildings, but these are not old buildings. These are new buildings. The last few collapsed buildings we've had in this country are new buildings that some of them still under construction. That means somebody is not doing their job. They are not checking as they are supposed to check. Who gets punished for these things? I mean, we had this conversation over and over again, how one of the biggest challenges in Nigeria is consequence management, where someone does wrong and there's no punishment meted out to that person. Where someone does right, no reward goes out to that person. At the end of the day, people begin to wonder, what happens? Let me just live my life and be going along. I want to build a house. I've gotten approval. Maybe I know Mr. A or Madam B. I've said, thank you for this approval. I've gotten my approval. Let me go and build my house. And you're building and you're going. Nobody is checking. Nobody is saying, no, this material you're using at this part of the building is not right. On the other hand, also, you have professionals who might come and give advice and say, okay, this is what you should use here. This is the kind of material. These are the kind of rods you should use for this kind of building. And they approve it. But the owners of the building go behind and go use substandard materials. What happens to those kind of buildings? Or what happens to those kind of, do they get punished? And is it known that they are punished because they did this? Buki, you mentioned the building, the last building that collapsed in Ikoyi. That also consumed the life of the owner of that building. How many lives do we have to lose to building collapse? Again, let me read out a few statistics before 271 of those buildings collapsed in the last 10 years. And of that 271 that collapsed, 115 cases are recorded in Lagos alone. What do we do? How do we stop this? The Building Collapse Prevention Guild, yes, they're going around checking how to prevent, but who even knows that they exist? I mean, this is the first time I am reading about them, that there is that kind of a guild. There is a society of engineers that's supposed to, and they have engineers who are working in these buildings. I mean, this kind of building, 7-story building, of course, I'm sure there were engineers in that site. What kind of engineering, what kind of checks are they doing? I don't know, guys. I don't know. But it's not too good. And honestly, really, it's painful to see lives being lost over and over again in cases like this.
You know, I'm just going through the updates from the DG of LASEMA, that's Lagos State Emergency Management Agency. Has been trying to give updates on that collapse. And as at 11 hours ago, or thereabouts, he had said that a 6-story building under construction had collapsed. Turns out 7 now. But he said that information revealed the building collapsed as a result of a truck that ran into it, saying that emergency first responders are on this. So this was 11 hours ago. In fact, put pictures there. And this is from his Twitter handle, at Okel Sohintolu on Twitter. So maybe that's an insight into this. Of course, you know that investigation naturally would happen to ascertain the real cause of this collapse. But this is what I have seen. Just thought to add this to the information that we have already. So we'll keep tabs on that. It is a developing story, and get all the answers that Nigerians, Lagosians need on this collapse.
You know, Kado, that raises some questions as well. You know, what's the impact of the truck, that ran into the building? Is the building supposed to collapse just like that because of the impact of a truck that ran into it? And what's supposed to be the normal strength of, that structure?
So more questions now.
More questions now.
Well, that's the update we have for you. Again, it's a developing story. I'll bring you more as soon as we get it. But let's get into the papers. That's in a moment. We'll walk you through all of the dailies and what they're telling this morning.
this morning, starting out with the Vanguard newspaper. This is the headline they have. Presidential poll. APC, PDP fight over validity of the outcome. That's on the front page of Vanguard's main headline. Story continues on page 5. But let's see what the writers are. Why APC's electoral victory must not stand. PDP, PCC says judiciary is on trial. Must save Nigeria. Tinubu's victory reflects will of Nigerians. APC tells Atiku we didn't supply BVAS to INEC. Adds whipping up sentiment won't help PDP's case. Again, that story continues on page 5. At the World Bank IMF, that's a picture you see there of the central bank governor and his deputies at the World Bank IMF meetings. Besides that, bribe for promotion, PSC, that's the Police Service Commission, force headquarters to unearth syndicate. It's on page 8. I guess there's a cleaning up process going on there. I mean, yesterday the IGP met with his predecessors to review the performance of the Nigeria police, and that's historical. I mean, that kind of news is interesting. Let's hope that the review and whatever recommendations and reforms they want to bring in there would work out really. I mean, guess what? The chairman of the PSC is a former Inspector General of Police, so some good things would likely come out of the police force reforms. But let's go on. LP crisis festers as factions clash over control of Secretariat. How Obi was detained at London airport for hours. That story is on page 11. Obi won't be deterred by UK immigration officials' harassment coming from his media office. But let's come down. Killings. How herders killed 89, reduced 31 communities to rubble. That's in Benue, and local government leaders are speaking there. 10th NAS. APC chieftains meet Tinubu in Paris over zoning. That's on page 8. Let's see a bit of sports here. Ahead of AFCON 17 tourney, Ugbade, nothing Eaglets do will be special. Wow. Remember, Nduka Ugbade was in the team that first won the Under-17 World Cup. He made history in the world, and when he says there's nothing they do that will be special, let's go read that and find out exactly what continues on page 38. Let's see this. Mr. and Mrs. Before I let go of Vanguard, Mark, you like this one. Our lives are in the hands of our wives. Who told you that? I don't believe such rubbish. Our lives are in the hand of God. And then his friend says, go home and check. God handed it to them since. Women, thank you for taking care of us. And that's it from the Vanguard. And that's our welcome, Mark, with this morning.
Oh, that's certainly a wise man. And, you know, what can I say? Oh, well, good morning. And indeed, apologies that I'm a bit late this morning. But take a look at Daily Trust and what it is that they have for you on the front page. 48 hours to go. Anxiety in Adamawa, Kebbi, others ahead of supplementary polls. 36,935 voters to determine Fintiri Binani's fate. 94,209 to decide Bagudu's successor. Wamako, Tambuwal, Marafa, Bilbis, others in final battle for Senate. Expect seamless election process, as according to the police. So maybe, I don't know, that review they're doing, isn't it a little too early? Shouldn't they wait until everything, including the supplementary polls, are concluded before
they do the review?
Before they start the review?
I think the review is holistic, not just about the polls.
Okay.
Well, they say it's better late than never. Maybe this one is better early than never.
Than never. Well, who knows? Page 4 is where you find details there. Look at all the other stories. Governorship results, APC petitions tribunals in Kano, Plateau, Rivers. Okay, so it's not over until it's over. IMF urges Nigeria to increase tax to cut borrowing. Military shuts Maiduguri juvenile sex brothels. So something also happening there that there needs to be attention. Page 2. Page 8 is where you get details. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
And flip very quickly to Leadership newspaper. There's a very pretty disturbing story on the front page of Leadership newspaper, but perhaps it could be interpreted as, something near to our terms, lack of consequence management. I hope I captioned it correctly, but here it is. Amid renewed attacks, villagers mobilize, kill 50 bandits in self-defense as terrorists kill 20, abduct 32 in Niger, Kaduna. We abandoned the bodies in Kainji National Park. Kadi, this is unsavory.
And it becomes like a cycle now.
Yeah.
There might be reprisals, and then it just keeps going on and on like that. And you wonder, where are these security agencies in all of this? What work is being done? Because, hey, you know the start of the story, but you never know the end.
The end. And this happens, where villages are attacked, and, there's no protection for the people. Those in southern Kaduna have complained time and again that they don't have cover, particularly when attackers come.
Sure.
And most of the time they come when they're asleep in the night.
Benue
and
too.
then they're left helpless. Benue as well. Yeah. So this is really disturbing, and we hope there'll be a lot of preventive actions and measures to forestall any reprisals in these areas. Well, that's it for the big story, but let's go above the nameplate now and see this one. Well, beneath the nameplate, first of all, Atiku, PDP's petition meaningless. APC tells Tinubu. That continues the petition contesting the election victory of the president-elect. And there are quite a number of, other contentions of election victories, which will form a lot of our talking point this morning. Now, let's see this one above the nameplate. We're ready for Adamawa Kebbi rerun polls that's ascribed to the electoral umpire. Now, I wonder if the word here would be rerun or supplementary election. Supplementary election is additional election held in areas where elections were cancelled as a result of one concern.
You're talking about the one on Saturday, right?
Yeah, the one on Saturday.
Well, INEC has described it as a supplementary election.
Supplementary elections. I'm just worried about the word there. Rerun would be if the entire process is cancelled and the election is being held all over again. Now, there's this one right beside that one, how Obi was questioned, detained at Heathrow Airport. If you're interested in details, you'll find them on page 6 of Leadership newspaper. Let's leave it there now for Leadership.
Well, The Guardian leads with something really captivating. Take a look at this one. $800 million World Bank subsidy palliative. Nigerians share $747 million. Logistics gulp $53 million. So, in case you had done the calculation with $800 million, just how much it will come to for those, vulnerable Nigerians or households, as the case may be. 50 million vulnerable Nigerians, 10 million households. Well, you need to do the calculation, redo it with $747 million, according to this report. It's a page 6 read, and this is something that has raised lots of questions about how it needs to be done, what should be done, if this is even the right way to go. But more details on the inside pages. And of course, that story, from phone leak to treason charge, Obi stirs fresh controversy with London arrest. So that's also another big story that has been developing, and more details on the inside pages. Just wonder, different twists and turns here and there. Goodness. I'll just take one more for you. This one ties to the story we led with, and we should say there must be strong consequences for this latest collapse. If someone needs to be fired at the top, they need to be fired. We need to set the right examples. Things should not just happen and we sweep it under the carpet, right? Workers trapped as 7-story building collapses in Banana Island, Lagos. We understand that, well, 7 of them at least have been rescued. There are concerns that someone else might be trapped. But again, we'll bring you the details as soon as we get them. Let's leave it there for The Guardian.
And New Telegraph is what I have here with this headline: 10th House, Bajabia Miller moves against deputy. Others. Well, check page 2, 4, and 29. I mean, why would he be? Well, these are just headlines. It might not really be that he's going against his deputy's desire to be speaker. Roots for Abbas as successor. Those are the writers. First female reps elect Onoha joins race. Reps Northern Caucus weighs options. APC will decide 10th Assembly leadership after Ramadan. Govt polls court nullifies Kogi APC's delegate list. Check page 526 and 30. Diaspora health workers petition NAS over doctors' 5-year compulsory service bill. That's on page 5. That story still writing the headlines.
What story is that?
Diaspora health workers petition NAS over doctors' 5-year compulsory service bill. It's on page 5. Still writing the headlines. Presidential polls, aggrieved parties can prove non-compliance within 180 days. Sage. APC's ask Tribunal to dismiss Atiku, PDP's petition. That's on page 3 and page 5. And let's see this one above the nameplate. Just this last one. Facility decay threatens 538 billion naira investment in Nigerian ports. Nigerian Ports Authority and governments, please take note of this. Facility decay threatens 538 billion naira investment in Nigerian ports. That's a huge one. So what can we do? Meanwhile, there's news that I think one of the papers from the leadership that Bukola was reading, there's a headline there about importers clearing cargo from Lekki port in 2 days. That's coming from the NPA. So what about the old ports? Are they being abandoned because there's a new port coming out?
Well, the ports better be more efficient. I want to believe that if there is competition, the moment a monopoly is broken somewhere and you know that there's an alternative and the alternative is more efficient, the only way you can keep your customers will be to ensure that you now become more efficient. So if you're not efficient, you know, they go to the one that is more efficient. Prayerfully, both of them don't become inefficient.
I like that, prayerfully.
And then become a duopoly. You know, but let us see, you know, what happens with the introduction of this. But certainly, the new port has to do its best to get new customers.
True. Now, that's it from the New Telegraph.
Well, I'm looking at this Nigeria for you, and they focus on the chat you had earlier about the story building which collapsed on Banana Island yesterday evening. Look at the sad tale as 7-story building collapses in Banana Island. 7 rescued, 1 missing as Lagos orders probe. Well, that's the lead story there. And page 5 is where you'll find details. Just taking a look at the picture that they have there. The picture looks more like that of the building that collapsed in Ikoyi, but who knows? You might want to look inside the paper to just be sure if that is the same building or if that's the one in Banana Island. Federal government approved 6 billion naira for maintenance of 3rd mainland bridge. Okays 17 billion naira for review of old Enugu-Onitsha road contract. That story is also there. Diri Anyanwu emerged PDP flag bearers in Bayelsa, Imo. It's on page 10. And look at this. NAS leadership positions will be zoned after Ramadan. That's according to the Senate spokesman. That's certainly came from our program yesterday. Nigerians react as LP confirms Obi's arrest, detention in the UK. So page 18 is where you find details. And just in case you're wondering what it is we're doing with gas, if Nigeria still has any, is it laws now or rules around gas flaring? Look at this. Shell, Chevron, others to pay 22 billion naira fine to federal government for gas flaring. So page 16 is where you'll find details. I'm surprised that we're still flaring gas in this day and age. When you look at all the advantages, it's like you're just burning money. When you look at all the things that can be done with the gas which we're just flaring away. And these companies know, is it that there is no will to make the requisite investment? What exactly is the constraints around, which still forces or which still makes companies to flare gas?
I still say consequence management.
Indeed. And to know that the NNPC has a joint venture with these companies. So you would think that the stakes that our NNPC, or now NNPCL, has within them should at least force them to do the right things. But who knows? Let's leave it there for this Nigeria.
Direct. It leads with something that has to do with poverty alleviation. Take a look at the headline. 400 billion naira poverty alleviation fund implementation Govt 50 billion naira. That's ascribed to the steering committee. This rider goes thus: performance low, not where we expect to be. Now, I'm not quite sure if this is the same grant as the $800 million World Bank grant, but there you have it. This is a poverty alleviation fund. You find details on page 3.
That would be subsidy palliative funds. So it's quite different.
No, but if implementation is gulping 50 billion naira, what is left?
That one is logistics. The other one is logistics gulping.
What kind of logistics?
I don't know.
Oh dear. Well, so many figures going into one project or the other that we need to take a second look at. The funds allocated to the implementation of internet in institutions and airports, it's a bit, too good to be true.
Yeah.
Some of these figures are alarming, and they need some form of audit.
You understand why she's concerned, because these are taxpayers' money, except the ones that are loans, of course. But when you're repaying, you repay with taxpayers' money. So we need to.
We are all concerned, not just me.
All of us, right?
Concerned.
Okay, let's leave it there with the dailies this morning. It gives you an insight as to what to expect, what is happening. But we're starting off the conversation, the big one, on the show in just a moment. So stay with us. Don't go away.
The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, conducted the presidential and National Assembly elections and has declared Bola Ahmed Tinubu the president-elect. The declaration has since been rejected by his opponents, Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party and Peter Obi of the Labour Party, who have vowed to challenge the outcome of the election in court. The failure of INEC to upload election results to the INEC Result Viewing Portal, IREV, in real time using the BVAS are some of the reasons why Mr. Obi is challenging the presidential election and the declaration of Bola Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress as the winner of the presidential election. Parts of his demands at the Election Petition Tribunal include: he wants an order mandating INEC to retrieve the certificate of return issued to Mr. Tinubu and issue a fresh one to him. Alternatively, Mr. Obi is asking the tribunal to make an order cancelling the election and compelling INEC to conduct a fresh election at which Tinubu, Shetima and the APC will not participate. The petitioner specifically alleged that at the time of the elections, Tinubu was not qualified to contest. They also argued that the election was invalid by reason of corrupt practices and non-compliance with the provision of the Electoral Act of 2022. Similarly, the Action Alliance and the Allied People's Movement have equally lodged separate petitions to challenge the outcome of the presidential election. The candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, is expected to file his own petition before midnight of March the 21st, when the deadline will elapse. Section 132, subsection 7 and 8 of the Electoral Act of 2022 stipulates that election petitions must be filed within 21 days after the date of the declaration of results of the elections, and the tribunal shall deliver a judgment in writing within 180 days from the date of the filing of the petition. Section 134 of the 2022 Electoral Act provides that a party who intends to challenge the process and outcome of an election can do so on the following grounds. 1. A person whose election is questioned was at the time of the election not qualified to contest the election. 2. The election was invalid by reason of corrupt practices and non-compliance with the provisions of this Act. And 3. The respondent was not duly elected by the majority of the lawful votes cast at the election.
Technically speaking, elections are not done just yet until the petitions arising from those elections are dispensed with. So the elections may have come, as I always say, but they've certainly not gone in their entirety. And we're getting right into those petitions and what to expect, managing expectations for Nigerians. And we're joined, as you can see, by Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Yemi Candid Johnson, joins us virtually via Zoom this morning. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily. I know some people have asked with all of the senior lawyers and lawyers involved in petitions across the board, from the presidential, to the state election, they wonder what would happen to other cases. So maybe it's just start with that background to answer the questions which some have raised, thinking the courts will be occupied with just election petition. What happens to other cases? Will justice be served for those other cases that are not related to election petition as well?
Well, that is a major problem. The fact is that at the present time, judicial resources are disproportionately dedicated to election tribunal issues, to political contests, and the day-to-day disputations and problem solving which the courts should provide to ordinary Nigerians and to businesses is suffering dramatically. The election season is damaging to the administration of justice across the board.
Oh dear. I don't know how these things are weighed, because everybody deserves justice. But you, in a recent interview, you've talked about how this is a critical test for the judiciary. So let's start from that point. What did you mean by this being a critical test for the judiciary, really? Because, we know that the judiciary is meant to be independent, and really what comes out of the judiciary is expected to be at least the very best. So what did you mean by that?
I didn't mean to criticize the judiciary. I meant to indicate, as a matter of fact, what is provided by these political contests is the testing of the very independence, impartiality, and rationality of court processes and judgments. And so when, in any case, in an ordinary criminal case, in a commercial dispute, the parties know what the facts are, and very often their lawyers have told them what the law is. The only person who is an indeterminate factor is the judge who decides. And so, in many respects, it is the judge that is on trial in any single case, not just in political cases. But in political cases, that test comes under a very high and searing spotlight, and people look very closely. And because elections are such an emotive and disruptive, high-temperature event, judges have to be aware not only that the decisions they make will affect the political outcomes and the perspectives of people for years to come, but also that judgment of their action may be jaundiced by emotional responses, by political affiliations, by ideology. And some people, regardless of what the courts do, regardless of how clear an opinion is expressed by the court, will not believe it. But that's part of the condition in any political society.
Well, this election is unlike any other, really, in terms of the participation, the expectations from Nigerians, how much a lot of people were invested in it, the turnouts, well, maybe would leave that to later, but particularly the results that came out. We had at least 4 frontliners, as they say, and I don't think we've ever had elections outcome this close in Nigeria. So a lot of people are naturally focused on the election petition tribunal to see how things will happen. And of course, they have received lots of petitions. I was looking at 2019 and just seeing the time frame, because this is a major part of the conversation. Elections held February the 23rd, 2019. The petition was filed. Now, for the People's Democratic Party, which was the main challenger of that election, the petition was filed March 18th. And the judgment from the tribunal now was delivered 177 days after. So in terms of managing expectations, we're in 2023, there are lots of parties and candidates challenging the presidential result now. That's what we'll focus on for a start. What should they expect? What will go on now that I don't know if it will be televised? What will go on behind the scenes if it weren't televised?
Well, expectation in any case has to be moderated by the facts and circumstances that are in controversy. If I'm framing a case, I'm bearing in mind that it has a forensic aspect, and in a political case, it has a political aspect, there are emotional aspects. Those who present cases and those who defend them have the obligation to manage the expectations of their own, if you like, clientele or constituency. So when you raise an election petition about a presidential election, you have a very wide canvas on which to paint. That canvas includes the contest in 176,000 polling units. Before you spoke to me, you outlined the limited grounds upon which an election can be challenged. The fact is that there's a declaration made by the statutory body charged with conducting elections, and there is a presumption of law that the acts of an official body are valid and correct. The onus, therefore, is on the person who seeks to dislodge that presumption to present evidence. It's not a matter of headlines. It's not a matter of sentiment. It's not a matter of human pathology. It's a matter of forensics. It's a matter of data. It's a matter of management of evidence, the confining of your case to specific targets. If you want to contest the election in 176,000 polling units, it's going to take you more than 180 days. So what you have to do, if you are managing the expectation and you're managing the chances and the impact of your case on the political outlook, is to target, according to your understanding of the electoral map, the areas where your strengths for upsetting the results are. You cannot bring evidence about 176,000 polling units. So you may say, well, I won in London, but I didn't win in Manchester. So I'm going to forget about Manchester. Let's assume Manchester is correct. Now, in London, there were problems with the election, and the number of votes I got there of which I was denied, were sufficient to have changed the direction of the election. There's no point in telling me about numbers that don't change the result of the election. So the construction of any case, more so a political case with such a wide canvas, requires skill and understanding, both of politics, of the electoral map, and of law by those who will present the case. And in that background, they have to manage the 180 days. If you only have 3 questions of law to decide before the tribunal, the matter could be decided next week. But if you have a multiple arrangement of facts, you want to manage those facts, you want to call witnesses, you want to analyze evidence of photography, of videos. If you build a case which is massively factual, then 180 days is a very short time.
And related to that, it does seem like a lot of work for presidential election. You've outlined 176,000 polling units, and not to talk of the 28 states of the Federation where we had elections, and the countdown for 180 days has already begun. How fast, can the process be? Are we looking at a situation where some of the petition tribunals may not be able to meet the target days of 180 days as mandated by the Electoral Act?
Well, the 180 days is not a mystery. It has been stated in the electoral law, and it's been there before the election was conducted. So before you were nominated, and before you contested the election, you were aware that the process would end, and the part of the process was this 180 days. So there again, it is for you to manage. If you look at examples in other countries, I like to look at the highly controversial election in the United States in 2000. The entire presidential election focused on the votes in Florida. Florida was the key battleground state where the outcome of the election in Florida would decide, and did decide, the 2004 election. They didn't go around calling for election results in Alabama, in Kentucky, in Ohio. They focused on where their challenge was viable and where their challenge was going to be decisive. And in 2004, because you have to prepare in advance. If you're an election, it's not just about the campaign. The election petitions process, which a candidate may activate, is part of the process of the election. So again, because in 2000, the Florida election was decisive of the presidential contest in America, in 2004, months before the election in 2004 presidential, the Democratic Party sent more than 500 lawyers to Florida alone. Why? Because they needed to anticipate that there would be a contest there and that they must be prepared within a very short time frame to build a case, to manage it, and to present it in a compelling way that would be decisive for them. There's no point crying about milk that has been spilled if you were foretold that this milk was going to be spilled.
Now, analyses are already being made, comparisons with, what happened in 2019 and some other years. In 2019, it is said that, there were more election petition cases, and in 2007, I think the number was 1,200 plus election petition cases. And the analysis is to the effect that because we have just about over 400 post-election petition cases, the introductions into the Electoral Act have helped to reduce the workload on INEC. But really, if we look at it critically, has it changed our culture? Has it reduced the number of and quantum of electoral violence and ballot box snatching? Has it reduced our culture of electoral, the way we conduct our elections, so to speak?
Well, the short answer, I think, is yes. I think that data which is being revealed as this election goes on, notwithstanding evidence of disruption, irregularity in certain places, is that the quality of the product has improved over the years, that many of the technological innovations, including those which failed, have created a more credible platform for testing the will of the people. I think that the potential for violence, the potential for ballot snatching, the potential for potential fraud, voter cheating, and corruption is always going to be available in a situation where there is a contest for a highly valuable commodity. And this is human nature. The task of the state and its resources is to limit the opportunities and the effect of those events and to punish those who participate in undermining the legal process. So this is something that must be done. But I think that to answer your question, in my own impression, the testing of this process will show that it is markedly improved in many respects. The BVAS, for example, even if it only worked 80% or whatever percentage they say, was able to exclude a vast number of illegal and unlawful votes. And by comparison to elections in previous years, I think that you will find that many of the abuses which were exhibited before have been eradicated. And it means that our democratic process, the system of testing the will of the people in this every four-yearly event, is improving. Our democracy is maturing, and the process is becoming finer. And I think that we in Nigeria, we tend to concentrate on what we have done wrong. And that's fair enough because you want to improve that. But I think that we can take some pleasure in some of the things we have done right and that we are moving in the correct direction. I think that however disappointed any party may feel, however anxious or people may be about the result and about the prospect of whoever will take power after these elections, I think that Nigeria is moving forward. I think this is quite clear.
Well, let me come in here. I'd like to ask you about, and this is generally, because in many instances, yes, the elections have been received with mixed feelings, and this is the presidential, in fact, in some instances, elections leading up to the National Assembly, and also the governorship elections. In some instances, some people said, oh, the results seemed as clear as day, given what happened at the presidential elections. Permutations could already have been made regarding some states. I'm wondering whether you see, are you surprised by the election petitions that have, been filed in some states by political parties?
From a political perspective, I'm not surprised. You know, politics is about gathering the largest number of people around you to follow and support your ideas. And the electoral test is often an occasion for concentrating those people in these gatherings. If you lose an election, it's very likely that your support and your credibility will very quickly dissipate. So an election petition as a political tool is a means of extending expectation and keeping your constituency together. So I'm not surprised about that. I'm also not surprised about the permutation. I think that most people will understand, if they had agents on the ground, what exactly has occurred, and they will understand even the permutations that seem to confound expectation. People will have understanding of them. But politicians will take decisions in their political interest, not necessarily only on a forensic, legal, and mathematical analysis of the election results.
As a lawyer, does that bother you?
Well, you know, even in a land case, in a banking case, there's the law, there's the evidence, and there is the commitment of the individual to pursuing a remedy. In divorce, in disputes over family estates, people with legal rights must make a decision that suits them as to whether or not to pursue those rights. The existence of a right is not the only reason why you pursue it. You may consider other things as well. So it doesn't disturb me that any individual will take a personal decision as to how to pursue a right presumed or existent. But I have confidence in the forensic process which is deployed in the courts. I believe that if a case is presented to the highest ability and defended to the highest ability and efficiency, that the court is the best environment in which facts may be analyzed, data may be analyzed, arguments may be heard, and the best possible rational decision may be produced. So I have confidence in the system of justice. There have been aberrations in many decisions in the past, but there is no better instrument for determining truth than cross-examination and the analysis and presentation of evidence. And if a case is well conducted, it's very easy to blame judges and to put the burden on them. But the principal task of organizing, analyzing, and presenting a case is that of the lawyer who has the brief. If he presents a compelling case, it becomes increasingly difficult for a judge, no matter how ill-motivated such a judge may be, to divert from the truth as far as the facts and the law.
Okay, well, you've just spoken about evidence and making a compelling case. We know that, as with other matters, the burden of proof, beg your pardon, always falls on the petitioner. And some people have argued that in election matters, it should fall on the umpire of the elections. They think that INEC should bear burden of proof since they're usually joined in matters. And we've also seen some controversy in recent times with political parties alleging that it's been difficult for them to get access to election materials used to conduct the elections. In some states, it's causing a bit of controversy. Do you think that the next set of reforms should be looking at shifting the burden of proof to the umpire?
Well, let me say that it is true that in many of these contests, there are logistic, administrative, and sometimes malicious impediments to gathering evidence. I've seen this before in cases myself, and that is a problem. If the electoral umpire has the official custody of documents, they should also anticipate that those documents should be ready to be made available immediately upon an election. That is a failure on their part, and it is unacceptable that parties should have to struggle to get the material which is in public custody, which they need to present their case. But having said that, the question that you asked directly about onus of proof, I think that I don't want to say it's a lazy expectation, but the fact is that for the proper operation of administration, you have to assume that if you give a public body a legal mandate, it will act according to that legal mandate. If you feel it has not done so and you intend to bring a petition, you must have some idea. I spoke earlier on about the Democratic Party in the United States sending 500 lawyers to Florida. which means that before the election, they knew exactly where there were going to be problems, and they knew exactly how to tackle them, how to retrieve evidence, how to organize them, analyze them, and present them in a legal contest. If after the election, you are still trying to find out where the weakness of the presentation by INEC is, you're already starting way behind the starting block, and you have hobbled yourself to a great degree. But then you can't, to ask the electoral umpire to prove that the election was valid, all they need to do is present the electoral certificate and say, we presented an election roll on so date. They're mechanical aspects. You can't expect them to prove there was no ballot snatching. You can't expect them to prove that there was no falsification. You can't expect them to prove that there was no corruption or bribery. That is a task that is for the person who is challenging the result to anticipate, to gather, to organize, to analyze, and to present. So it's a deflection from the responsibility of the person who has to prove a case in every aspect of civil and criminal law. The legal prescription is that he who asserts must prove. There's a reason for that, because if you want to make a case, you are the one who should present it. You can't say your failure to disprove that there was irregularity is a foundation for my case. It doesn't make any rational sense.
Mr. Johnson, the election petition tribunals as they stand, it looks like they've come to stay in our political circle. Someone will say, as far as it has to do with democracy, there will be those who would always want to contest whatever results come out there. But is there a chance that we might go past this sometime in our democratic process where we will not have this kind of contestations?
You know, we look with admiration at the stability of the electoral process in many other countries. And the UK is often a good model for us in this country because that country governed this country for many years. In the last, or the penultimate election in the UK, an election petition was filed somewhere in the north of England. And the reporters pointed out that it was the first election petition against the appointment of an MP for 150 years. So 150 years ago, there was a high degree of contestation about elections, but they continue to improve the system. It's not that they didn't start from where they are. The testing of our electoral process, the development of jurisprudence on what needs to be proved, on how it needs to be organized, will continue to limit the challenges. When the electoral space is open and the law seems to be open, you're going to have multiple challenges because unhappy losers are going to find it difficult, having expended money and time and emotional expectation, to accept that they have lost. But as the jurisprudence of elections in our own territory continues to improve, people will understand that if you don't have this and if you don't have that, there's no point mounting electoral challenge. And so I'm not despondent at the high degree. It is normal for people to who are disappointed to look for solutions by whatever means there is. But I think that increasingly we will get to the stage where people realize that it's not worth it. You know, I'll give you another foreign example. In 1960, Richard Nixon lost the presidential election against John F. Kennedy by less than 65,000 votes. Many people asked him to challenge the election. They said that in Chicago, dead people voted, that the electoral register was manipulated. And it became a contest as to whether he would sacrifice the credibility of the presidential election over this potential that these 65,000 votes could be upturned. And he took a political decision that it was not worthwhile. Some people may say, I'll be a winner or I'll be a loser, but I won't be a sole loser. Because all electoral contests are decided by the people in the end, whether it's after the election that has gone before or the election that is to come. The electorate will take a view as to how you have conducted yourself, and it is part of your political presentation. And so in the case of Richard Nixon, 4 years later or 8 years later, he then was elected as president. He did not destroy his credibility as a political gladiator by what he saw at that stage to be an unnecessary and a contest which would paint him in a poor light. So these are personal decisions that candidates must take. And they must recognize that politics is perennial. It does not end after a single election. And even after the result of an election, whether good or bad, you must consider the consequences on your political career of how you respond.
You know, the example you gave of President Nixon and how the decision he made points to the fact, again, why we do have a democracy, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But that decision is by the people, for the people. So if we, at every juncture in our electoral process, have to go back to the court, there are those who argue that cases, yes, I know you mentioned this earlier, the cases that should be looked at are not given attention because the judiciary is somewhat overburdened, so that they just fly over a lot of cases just so that they can get these out of the way, because there is a process of handing over to the next government, and that continues to go on in over and over and over again, somewhat slowing down the process of national growth. So then people ask the questions, what if we had special courts? I know the tribunal is a specialized court. I mean, special courts built and designated consistently and continually to handle cases of corruption and election offenses or electioneering processes, as the case may be. Could that help in any way?
Well, you know, the purpose of a special court, in my opinion, is to bring special skill and ability to the resolution of specialized questions. So in some countries you have a technology court, or you have a court for commercial transactions or divorce. That can work. The legal issues in an election petition are not arcane or particularly sophisticated. They're about the management of evidence. Was there violence? Do the numbers add up? It's a simple enough forensic inquiry. The problem is not with creating a specialized court. The problem is, one, the volume of cases which courts have to deal with, and secondly, the logistical confusion and the logistical difficulty of organizing and presenting the cases. This, of course, also happens in ordinary cases. The system of processing cases that come before our ordinary courts is entirely inefficient. It is calculated to cause delay. It tolerates indolence and incompetence by lawyers, and that is a matter that requires specific reform itself. The administration of justice in civil and criminal areas in our courts needs to be fine-tuned dramatically in a way that allows the cases that come before the courts to be processed in an efficient and effective manner. So there's a problem with the organization of our system of justice apart from that. But it becomes accentuated in the limited area of electoral jurisprudence, where even though no particularly significant new area of law is being pursued, the sheer volume and the sheer grandstanding, the display of intransigence, the in many cases incompetence, the tardiness of lawyers. This is an area where, because there is such a sharp spotlight, everybody's being careful. And I think you will find that in electoral cases, a lot of bad behavior is tolerated from lawyers. And these are aspects of the efficient operation of the system of justice which ought to receive attention.
Let me just ask this one before my colleagues in Lagos come in, saying that, okay, this is where we are and this is what we have to deal with. We need to go to the courts to resolve all electoral issues almost every electoral cycle. What should the candidates and their teams be doing? For instance, recently the candidate of the president-elect, his representatives were having a media party talking about evidence here or no evidence there. Should that be happening?
Well, those are political decisions. The fact is that because this is a political contest, affecting the public's perception is something that is relevant for the parties who are presenting cases. And it's a fine line. You're commenting on a pending case and the impact it may have on the administration of justice in that case is a line that lawyers must watch, because they must be careful that their interventions outside the court do not adversely impact what is going on in the court. But people are going to take political decisions, and it's not sufficient to win in the court. Again, you refer to courts deciding political matters. When a court decides a political case, whatever their decision is, that decision is going to be tested by public perception, and it's going to be tested on the ground. Ultimately, every political contest is decided by the people. Regardless of what decision comes on paper from INEC, there's a process for challenge. Irrespective of what decision comes by a judgment of the court, it has to manifest. So I remember the joke in 1983 when the elections were held in Ondo and there was huge disruption on the ground, and the governor-elect of Ondo State was accepting congratulations while in Lagos, and somebody asked jokingly, why don't you accept congratulations on the ground in Ondo State? If you won an election, you should have immunity on the streets of the area where you have won elections. So there is a test beyond the judicial process. If the court says that somebody has been elected to an office, he has to go back and manifest himself in that office on the ground. Of course, I know that some representatives will remain in Abuja for all their tenure, but then if you are representing people in Sokoto or you're representing people in Ibadan, they should see you physically in those places, and the acceptance that you have on the streets is, in my opinion, the best test of your success in electoral office.
Some will call that street credibility, but two quick issues from me as we begin to wind down. First, you have a case where INEC defends the outcome.
I've lost sound. I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Oh, great. I was just, saying that is called street credibility, the point you made. But two quick points for me. You have a case where INEC is defending the outcome of the election. Also, the party that won, the candidate that won, is also defending the result of that election against the loser in this case, one person, one candidate and its party. And some say, well, this looks like 2 against 1. Is that an anomaly? Because people also interpret that in different ways. So maybe shed more light on that for people who might be seeing that as a 2 against 1 situation.
I'm not so sure what that means. The fact is that if you contest an election with 15 people, it's 1 against 16, it's 1 against 14. So this is the map that was drawn. If an electoral contest is open to anybody who qualifies, then you're against all those people. And you must anticipate that any one of those people could challenge election results. So I don't think that the number is relevant. If you are the winner of an election, you really have to defend your election against everybody who was in the contest. And so you must anticipate that it'll be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 against 1. I don't think that's unusual or in any way remarkable.
Well, so I was saying that INEC is usually on the side of the winner, in quote, defending that same election results. That's the point I'm trying to make, against whomever is, challenging, who's petitioning the case. So some say that it's usually stacked against the petitioner who has to deal with INEC defending the result and the winner defending the result. I don't know if that comes across.
Well, the fact is that INEC is intended to be an impartial statutory body. It has presented a result, and it would be unusual for an official body to come and say that the result that it had presented was not correct. So you must assume that whoever is declared the winner should have INEC on his side, because INEC, having resolved the election by presenting a certificate, has determined that one person won the election. That's not unusual. To expect anything else would be absurd. To expect that the umpire, having declared a result, it's like asking a judge to decide a case and then to issue a press conference saying, even though I've given judgment for the plaintiff, I really think that the defendant has won. It would be absurd, and it would by itself undermine any credibility that the decider of that issue has.
Well, as we wind down now, Mr. Candid Johnson, the 4-yearly cycle, this season, it goes without saying that it's a time of harvest, so to speak, for our lawyers. INEC itself said, after the primary election, that it had been joined in 1,241 intra-party lawsuits in different courts of law, and some of the cases were needless. I'm just wondering, isn't that part of the problem? And going forward, if there were to be reforms, what would be your thinking in terms of reforms, in this area particularly, where lawyers smile to the banks, doesn't that encourage, the huge number of litigations that we have trailing post-election cases, even from the primary level, and what we have now?
Well, I don't have any problems with lawyers earning a living. Let this be said, first of all. I like the characterization of the electoral season as some sort of harvest. And for those who are involved deeply in electoral politics, it is some sort of economic bonanza. I'm happy for them. But lawyers don't make cases. Lawyers are approached when people have a grievance, and the job of the lawyer is not just to think about what he will earn, but to determine whether there is a factual and legal basis for the case he's presenting, and whether it's worthwhile on many grounds to make that presentation. Now, I recognize that some lawyers will make that decision entirely on their economic interest. This is unethical. And this is a form of misconduct, which is a matter for the legal profession itself to regulate. If a lawyer in many jurisdictions brings a case which is doomed to failure, he will risk his license to practice, because courts take the view, a very strong view, against lawyers deliberately wasting their time. And if a case is manifestly unwinnable, or a lawyer manufactures massages or misrepresents evidence, or lies to the court in order to present a case, that lawyer has no rights to continue in the legal profession and should be disbarred. That is a very clear fact. Right. So this is one way of regulating the behavior of lawyers and ensuring that the filter of legal advice is faithful and that it produces only cases that have a genuine viability for success.
Well, great point there. Quickly, we know that as the court is sitting, there are people who are also conducting some sort of parallel tribunals, on social media, taking a look at all of the, the cases and all of that. And some believe that the system is maybe loaded against them. And these are opinions expressed now and then. Some have said this must be televised. And I wonder if that would affect the independence of a court in any way. But particularly to those people who believe that the system is loaded against them, what do you have to say to them as we wind down now?
Well, any publicity that is given to legal process is good. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. But I think that people tend to obsess about things that are not particularly significant. I have no difficulty with the process being televised. It's entertainment. And the better people can see what has actually gone on, the more likely they are to accept the result. Some will not accept the result irrespective. But it took, again, hundreds of years for courts to be allowed for cameras to be allowed to the courts in the UK. And even in other countries up till today, there are certain proceedings which cannot be televised. But in an electoral case, if people want to watch the process of the presidential election, for example, over the next 180 days, by all means they should. I don't think there's any difficulty in being seen, as long as it's not disruptive to the proceedings.
Oh, I think that's a great place to leave it. I was going to ask if, you know what, never mind. Thank you so much, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Yemi Candid Johnson. Just got me thinking about, the billions of naira that will be spent during this process. And we'll have this conversation again, hopefully, in the coming days, because this is very important to Nigeria's democracy. But again, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program this morning, sir.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Well, we'll go to break now. You have some insight into what to expect, but we're turning our attention to something equally important. It concerns the money in your pocket, your business, and all that has to do with Nigeria's economy yesterday, today, and in the coming days. Stay with us. aside the election and the outcome of it, the tribunals, one other conversation that is top for Nigerians is the economy. I mean, recent Naira crunch, what figures are saying, inflation, unemployment, multidimensional poverty, the list goes on and on. This is something that concerns our everyday life, the standard of living. So that's what we're focusing on right now, especially to set an agenda for the incoming government. And we're joined on the program this morning by a lady and a gentleman. I'll start right here in our Lagos studio. Fire Williams is SME Business Setup and Growth Consultant, past first vice president of NEC's network of entrepreneurial women. There's more. Former council member, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and founder, managing consultant, Simply Exponential Consult Limited. She joins us right here in our Lagos studio. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
It's great to see you, and lovely outfit, I must say.
Thank you.
And joining us virtually is a professor of economics and public policy. Professor Akpan Epo joins us from Uyo this morning. Thank you for joining us on the program as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let me start with you, Prof, just to maybe set a background, then I'll come to our guests in Lagos studio. And the question is this, particularly for the incoming government, for Nigerians at large, people who are interested in the economic outlook, outcome, reality of Nigeria. Just to lay the background, what kind of economy will the next government inherit? Yes, we know that they'll be sworn in, there'll be the pomp and pageantry, but let's get to the nitty-gritty. What kind of economy will they be inheriting?
Thank you very much. First, let me say I do not envy the incoming government because it's going to inherit an economy that, in my own words, is virtually in disarray. There are several challenges, so I don't envy, but is the new government, it has to deal with the challenges. So it will inherit an economy that in at least the last 5 years or so have not performed very well. The what we call the economic performance index is about 51%. You need 80% to be average. Poverty is rising. Unemployment is about 38% rising for youths. Underemployment is rising. The misery index is rising. All sort of problems, infrastructure problems, epileptic power supply. So I don't envy the incoming administration, but it has to run the economy, and it has to first, assemble a very good team that is committed to changing the structure of the economy. I think whoever comes from board, the new regime has to be honest to tell Nigerians that the hardship will not stop in a short time. It will take a long time for it to begin to show some positive results if the incoming administration is in the right direction. So I don't envy the new administration. There's a lot of bumps on the way. And for example, in an economy where, as I said earlier, unemployment is very crucial. It's about 8% and rising for youth. So once you have that type of problem, it means that the economy is operating below potential, below what we call in economics full employment output. So that regime has to hit the ground running, and I hope they're ready to do that.
Well, they campaigned for it. In fact, as I say, they begged to apply, and they always say, uneasy lies the head that wears a crown. So certainly it is imagined that they are aware of the job ahead of them. But quickly, just as a follow-up, you said these words, the economy has not performed well. I noticed you didn't quite talk about the government itself, because the economy, I mean, is not independent of government policies and all of that. So let's speak also to the performance of this outgoing government in the past 8 years, or you can limit it to 4 years, or after COVID, whichever one. Has the government performed well now in terms of economy?
Well, in terms of the economy, generally, the government has not performed well. The facts show that they not performed well. You live in an economy, as I said earlier, with so much, all the macro indices are moving around in the wrong direction. So definitely that economy cannot perform well. I said earlier, we did compute what we call economic performance index. and the government, the economy scored 51 or 53%, and you need 80% to say you're even average. So if we are realistic, the facts show that the economy has not performed well in terms of the economy, and that economy is government, because even if you have private sector, the economy is public sector led. Private sector definitely is the engine of growth, but not engine of development. So it's the government that we are referring to. And maybe there needs to be conversation as to why the government has not performed well. There are several reasons, but definitely, if we are realistic, it hasn't performed well. Poverty has increased, and so on and so forth. As I said earlier, the misery index has increased over the last 8 years. So it's the government, because any economy is public sector led, while private sector remains the engine of growth, but it's public sector led. So when we refer to the economy in general, we put much of the blame on the government side. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let me come to you, madam. And he talked about the private sector being the engine of growth. SMEs, they're like the lifeblood of any economy. And Nigeria, of course, we understand that the SMEs play a huge role. So I wonder, from the SME perspective, he has given some sort of overview. How would you describe the economy for the average SME today? How are they, do I say surviving or getting by or otherwise?
I think I'll start by using one word, which is harsh. The economy has been stifling and a little bit difficult to navigate for SMEs. As Medan has told us, SMEs do contribute to over 50% of GDP and about 80% of jobs. So this is a sector that cannot be ignored, a sector that should be encouraged. And by all means, that elusive, enabling environment we all talk about, we need it now. I would say that the outgoing government has given us a gift with the Business Facilitation Act.
Right.
But as we say with justice, it should not just be done, but seem to be done. So the Business Facilitation Act, to me, I see it as some kind of amalgamation, of various bills related to immigration, related to investment promotion, the SON, and, a couple KAMA, and a couple of other bills. They were brought together to give some direction, some clarity. And people like the Registrar General of the Corporate and, Affairs Commission, he has hit the ground running to ensure that within 14 days, anything related to business registration is cleared. And let's remember that the purpose of this bill is to have a situation whereby all the MDAs really, front load, if I can say, all their requirements. You want to get an approval, submit A, B, C. And if they don't revert to you within a specified service level agreement type of period, then it's deemed as you've gotten the approval. So let's really see that happen, because as recently as yesterday, an SME that I know was slammed a bill of 25.5 million over audited accounts between 2018 and 2022 by an agency that is not the Federal Inland Revenue Service. So after paying your company income tax, another agency comes to slam you a bill of 25.5 million. Hello. The enabling environment is not really what it should be.
Obviously, that's like a state agency that slammed
Yes, it's a federal agency.
A federal agency.
Yes, who have a mandate to collect some percentage on XYZ. I don't want to, badmouth any agency, but I know that government needs to keep a tab on what is happening.
Yeah.
And the last speaker spoke about unemployment rate. It is frightening. And a country like Nigeria, by now, we need to put things in place, like having a national job portal. I'm sure there are a few vacancies here in Channels. Maybe I could apply. But there are vacancies in various, private organizations at different times, and we don't have a centralized portal where we can just, type in our specs, qualification, and have a couple of candidates come up. So we're not really helping ourselves by not having that. And another thing we're not leveraging on is the tech and innovation. I mean, if we've been able to attract a Mark Zuckerberg to Nigeria, it means we have that growing army of youth who are just waiting to be empowered, you know, using the structure of possibly the innovation hubs, teaching these youth digital skills, and then being able to export Nigerian talents to the world in the right way, not just Jagba.
Now, I noted that you didn't want to mention the agency that slammed that bill, you know, on that small business.
SME, yeah.
I wonder if that is also part of the problem.
The concealment,
yes,
so to say.
Yes, I wonder if that is also part of the problem. I'd like you to speak to it. Also, you talked about the business bill. I'm sure that's the new Nigerian startup bill that you're talking about.
Yes, that's right, the Nigerian startup bill, the act.
To what extent has it addressed this problem of multiple taxation for small businesses in Nigeria? If Ayo were here, I'm sure that's the area that he was going to explore. So to what extent does it address it?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is that we really need to domesticate the Nigerian Startup Act in the various states, and there are a lot of provisions. Of course, it talks about your startup being qualified, not being beyond 10 years, you know, and it does give some incentives that you can tap into, but I am not sure that we are really reaping those fruits currently. It needs a lot of advocacy, political will, and more education of the players, the stakeholders, so that they can come out and really demand, you know, what has been given to them as a gift, I would say, in this, you know, Nigerian Startup Act, because it's now been passed, and we need to embrace it. We need to run with it, and we need to see how we can provide access, you know, to our SMEs. The percentages are low. I mean, the bank called me the other day and said, we've looked at your turnover and we think, you know, you are qualified for a loan 3% per month. And I wondered, is that supposed to be good news? I don't think so, because we need
3% is single digit.
It's not. It's 36% per annum.
Year,
per annum.
So
Thank God I could
huge.
look at that.
You could do the
you know?
math, because it sounds good when you hear
It sounds good, but
3%,
it is not really good news. So we need to realize that the development finance, the single-digit loans, the accessibility and making SMEs investment ready, because sometimes they just don't know, and what you don't know, you don't know. So the capacity building, the hand-holding needs to be there by agencies like the hubs. They are available. They're there. We have over 250 hubs scattered all over the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria right now. They're close to the people. And we have some best practices, like Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. When I started, you know, having an application with them, it was all online. But right now, LSETF has an office in every local government in Lagos State. So can you imagine if we can replicate that across 774 local governments all over Nigeria, where there is a listening ear who can speak to you possibly in the native language, can help you with a pen and paper, so that if you cannot use the internet or something, you're not disenfranchised. You know, so we need to replicate some of these best practices and take these solutions to the people. You cannot wait for them to access. You have to go closer to the community and get, you know, the help to the people who need the help, who need that access, and who can make a difference in the economy, just as you said.
So if you say that we're not reaping the benefits of the startup bill yet, it means that, is it safe for me to, you know, conclude that the startup bill only makes it easy, you know, for entrepreneurs, the budding entrepreneurs, to start off in the business, but they're going into the same harsh environment that established SMEs are already in?
I think the Startup Act actually has some provisions to make things, you know, better for them, like some tax holidays and that kind of thing. I may not be able to run through all the details right now, but if it is properly implemented, it wouldn't be business as usual. There is some respite. So once again, we're calling for domestication by the states, truly to get this thing off the ground and get our startups creating those jobs, spinning off like a go-carder, thousands of jobs, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's not all gloom and doom. It seems like there's something to, to celebrate. Let me now come to you, Prof. I noted that you said earlier, that the economy is not performing well, and you really do not envy the incoming administration as it is inheriting a difficult terrain, but the IMF team during their recent spring meetings, projected Nigeria's economic growth to be 3.2%, I think, for 2023. And in addition to that, the Nigerian economy was described at that spring meeting as one of the fastest growing in Africa, if not the fastest growing. I wonder if that is also not part of the problem. How should we be scrutinizing this assessment of the Nigerian economy when back home, we have had to deal with months and months of high inflation, high food inflation, a cash crunch? Is this assessment by the IMF a fair assessment of what is happening back home?
Thank you very much. See, we have to be very careful with the IMF forecast and prediction. There's a technical definition of stability. How can the economy be stable and you have rising unemployment way above the threshold of 5% or some percent for developing countries? Right now it's at 8%. You have inflation of about 26%. And sluggish growth, 3.1% growth rate is not respectable. It's better. It's almost close to population growth rate. But you need to grow, if not double digit, at least close to double digit, sustained over 10, 15 years. So we have to be very careful. See, the way the IMF runs its show is that when they say an economy is stable, it is perhaps the mathematical solution is stable, but the facts, the stylized facts, do not show stability. And stability could be, even when an economy is not doing well, there's some sense of stability. But you've said it. Look at the facts. The facts doesn't show an economy that is stable. And I'm sure one has to look at the narrative of the IMF. I haven't said so. What is the narrative? I heard they said that there will be a slow growth this year. So if the growth is very slow, is that an economy that is stable? So I think they are using stability in a strict technical economic sense. Although the facts are there why the economy will grow slowly. I mean, and apart from the domestic issues, there are also global challenges. So for me, I don't want to take the IMF prediction or narrative seriously, in the sense that perhaps what they've done is that they've grouped all the different countries together in their model, and Nigeria becomes a data point. And when they extract Nigeria, it appears that we are somehow doing well. But the narrative shows that this year there will be slow growth. So if the growth is very, very slow, 3.1%, which is better than contraction in technical sense, but it's not something to be excited about. So, and then the same IMF is saying that we need to reduce our debt, we need to look at the revenue side, do all sorts of things. So for me, I think it is the type of economics, the type of model they are using, and the IMF model is ideologically loaded, in the sense that once you believe that an economy should be market-driven, meaning that all markets must clear, then definitely you will work towards stability. But in real terms, the economy is not stable. The Nigerian economy is operating at what we call at a disequilibrium level. It is not stable. That stability that they're defining is not giving us full employment or potential output. So I don't agree with the IMF narrative on the issue of Nigeria being you can be the fastest growing economy, fine, but growth itself is not development. You can grow. Look at the Nigerian data from 1999 to now. The GDP growth rate is not too bad on average, but as that part about development, an economy that depends on generators, no economy grows with generators. We have a generator-driven economy. Madan just spoke about the SMEs. Every economy that has made progress has leapfrogged into development, has taken seriously the SME sector. Are we doing that? All these bills we are passing, the acts, all the laws, yes, they are fine, they look nice, but implementation remains a problem. So we have to deal with that. So let's, it's just that there's a complex in Nigeria and Africa. If our own economists say the same thing, they won't take it serious until the IMF says it at the World Bank. So for me, the IMF has made its point, but we should look at our economy inwardly and decide how to build an economy that is much more productive and can compete globally, and not be excited about what the IMF says. Thank you.
Yeah, I would wonder if there's some altruism in that assessment, and perhaps what the ultimate, incentive to that assessment would be. But perhaps my colleagues would have questions in that vein for you. That will be after the break. We'll pause for a break now and return with Sunrise Daily in just a moment. Stay with us.
Welcome back, Sunrise Daily, and we'll continue the conversation on the setting agenda for the new government in the area of the economy. Our guest on the show, Professor Akpan Ekpo, who's a professor of economics and public policy, and Fire Williams, SME business setup and growth consultant. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Let me begin with you, Professor Ekpo. You said some things earlier when you started your submissions. You talked about poverty, underemployment, unemployment, but you sort of landed on the electricity situation in the country. Now that the Constitution has been amended and states have the power to generate and distribute electricity to their residents, how do you think this would affect the economic situation in the country with the new government?
Very much. I'm glad that the amended constitution has allowed states to now generate, distribute, or transmit, or whatever, because it's very, very crucial. The governance structure is too centralized. For example, I know of my state, for example, where years ago they had a power plant, but that power plant can only generate the national grid, and then the national grid now gives some power back to the state. So with this new amendment, states are now free to go all the way in terms of the power issue. And I hope states will take this advantage, because you see, all research has shown that if you increase power supply by just 1%, this so-called GDP will increase by 3%. So why is it not? I mean, 63 years after independence, we are still having the power with power. It's crucial. Crucial for all sectors, SMEs, education sector, health, you name it. So I'm glad that amendment has been done. It's taken so long, but finally let's hope that states will take the advantage. That will make we change the direction of the economy. If we can have 18 hours of power supply, not even 24, okay? The countries we admire, we seem to admire, power supply is 24 hours. So companies run 2-3 shifts, MSCs run their shift and employ people. So for me, that's a major issue. So I'm glad that they've amended the law to allow subnational governments to go the full course in terms of the power issue. Prof. And I hope that they will grab that, and even in fact, states don't have to do it alone. They can come together, neighboring states, and ensure that power supply is everywhere. And believe you me, it will solve for the most part the unemployment issue.
Professor, when you said earlier that we have a generator economy, with this now, if the states get into generating power and distributing to its residents, those who have the generator business, their own economy will be tanked, sort of. Then you still have the issue of all the things that need to be put in place to ensure that the states even begin to generate this power to distribute. What do you think needs to be done? Yes, the power has been given to them, so that or everyone will sort of like be carried along? Those who are importing and selling generators, and then the states themselves that need to begin to generate and distribute this power. What would you suggest to this incoming government on the things that need to be done?
Well, the incoming government, I'm sure you mean the incoming government at the federal level. At the state level, they need to hit the ground running, ensure that they have their own power generating company, either as a state or with some states coming together. For those who are involved in generating business, that is, they can find alternative business. There are companies abroad that just produce generators only for Nigerian market. So it doesn't mean that you have generators. You have them, but they'll be standby. In case there's a major issue, then you turn on the generator, not the other way around. So they can find alternative business, but where an entire economy depends on generators, you cannot make progress. And check it everywhere in the world. You know, you have generators in buildings, but they're not the major power supply. So those in that business should find other things to do. In my view, you know, they can. When we say we need a power supply from the from non-generators, there are also people they have trained, technicians in different fields, engineers, who can now be part and parcel of this new development. So, as I said, it's very, very intense, it's very expensive, it's costly, very costly, and that is why in most countries you have some national governments coming together to get into the power business. And that's why we call it a kind of a regulated monopoly. But it's crucial. So I will not worry about those who are importing generators or those who are in the business. They should find other things to do, and I'm sure there are other things they can do. They can even be part of this new development, since some of them have trained Nigerians in different skills in the power sector. You know.
Well, I certainly know that as somebody who consults for SMEs, Madam Fire Williams, you certainly will be very interested in perhaps also speaking to how power is a challenge for SMEs. How big a problem do you think that is for SMEs, and that if states, given what the Constitution amendment is now allowed, if states are allowed to fully invest in it, what will it really make a difference, or how significant a difference will it be for SMEs?
Thank you very much, Mokwe. I would say it's the number one problem for SMEs because, number one, we spend a whole lot. It's about the problem that gives, that we spend the most on, and then it affects us seriously. So usually it makes the SME underperform. They're not able to meet their deadlines. They can meet customer orders. So having stable power supply, like Prof has mentioned, even for 18 hours a day would be a complete game changer for SMEs. So the small barber, the hairdresser, the dressmaker, they'll all, they'll have increase in productivity, and then the medium enterprises can go on with their production. The service providers like us can go on with our vocational training, and so on and so forth. Now, I looked at the statistics of how much power is being generated, but with solar, wind, and other sources, and it was just like 2.6 megawatts. So it's really so low. Here we are, sunny skies and all in Nigeria. We have so much energy, from wind, from sun and all that, but very little power. So I think that the decentralization and the ownership by states of this, hit the ground running order, go ahead, set up all these mini grids, and then you can invest in some transmission infrastructure so that we don't all rely on the national grid, which does collapse from time to time, as we have seen. So power really needs to be decentralized, and it would give the fillip, to these SMEs to go ahead, produce more, become better, and become global brands. Thank you.
Well, we know that that's going to take a while. That's going to take a while now. I mean, if states are going to go, some states have already made some investment in generation. We do not know how much investment has been done in transmission, considering that transmission generally has been centralized. I mean, has always been centralized. And it's unclear what investments there are in distribution. And we know that for them to set this, it might take a while. So in the meantime, considering how urgent and how dire the situation we are in right now is with the economy, what other major thing do you think that both states and federal government should focus on to make a huge difference for businesses in general?
All right, thank you very much. I think that access to market could help because, for instance, under the Procurement Act, if you want to, put forth for a tender, you have to have all the documents in this world, so to say. Those 3 years audited accounts, the pension fund administration thing, the NSITF and all that. There's a whole long list. So I would like to recommend that there should be some tiers in the procurement landscape, just as you have in an NSE, where you have, small companies at a certain level, and then the PLCs at another level. The startups, for instance, the software developers, if they should be able to bid, for jobs in the federal organizations, being able to create software solutions for parastatals and all that, instead of us spending Nigerian money abroad. So we should spend Nigerian money to uplift Nigerians, and that means we need to give our SMEs a role to play. So there should be some kind of window under the Procurement Act such that SMEs who are even 6 months old, some of these software development companies, the fintechs, they're just 6 months old. They don't have 3 years audited accounts. So you should be able to let them play, let them bid, and let them win so that they can put Nigerians in jobs. And we can keep what we have right here instead of the capital flight that we have right now. So you have brain drain on one hand, capital flight on the other, which is neither is good for us. So we need to change that narrative, empower SMEs, give them access to markets, enable them participate in the economy in a much better way, and then they will grow.
Let me come to you, Prof. We know that part of, in recent times, a number of zonal groups have been meeting to set an agenda for the incoming government. And one of the things that they've been asking for is security in their own region. For instance, in the North Central region, which is largely the food basket of Nigeria, they've been asking that security be solved so that their people can go back to the farms. And we know just how important that is. But we also know that when people are able to, go to farms, a lot of what it is that is produced is lost as a result of poor storage facilities and sometimes inefficient transport systems. So I'd like to ask you, what do you think? Because there's been deliberation on this particular problem, trying to solve the transport issue, trying to see, if governments can offtake some of this product or produce from farmers. Why do you think that some of the deliberations have failed, to achieve the desired result? And what do you think this new government should be focusing on to save the situation and also ensure that, food items are, easier to come across for Nigerians at a more affordable rate?
Thank you very much. The security issue is very, very crucial. Without security, you cannot do anything. You can't grow, you can't develop. Part of the inflation spiral, at least the food inflation, is due to insecurity. Farmers are not comfortable going to their farms. And any strategic thinking government should think of getting those products and storing them. Like we used to have some years back, the commodity boards, where you guarantee the farmers some minimum income, and you provide storage facilities for their crops. And so in terms of hardship or when things are difficult, you can now release such items to the market. So definitely, government has to look into that. I think I'm sure we have those silos all over the country where they are working is another issue. But security definitely is a major problem for the new administration. They must get security apparatus right. Otherwise, all the talk will not make much progress, because people are worried, people are scared, people cannot move around, not just farmers. If we are honest, the security issue is very, very serious. So I definitely agree that government should look into it and encourage farmers by having some kind of guaranteed minimum income for them, by buying up those things and keeping them, storing them for a rainy day. That's the way to go. But again, to do that, you first of all have to secure the area. You have to make sure that the farmers can go to their farm freely and work on their farm, produce, and then you can buy whatever they cannot sell to the market and keep as a government and guarantee them some minimum level of income. And that way, you can make food available. You see, if you spend more than 10% of your income on food, then there's a problem. We know that is the case in Nigeria. So definitely, security is very, very crucial, and government should look into that. It's a major priority. I mean, it should be a priority for the incoming government, security.
Thank you, Prof. Madam Williams, earlier on you talked about the Business Facilitation Act. Yes, it's been signed into law, and many small and medium-scale enterprises will be looking to that to see how well their businesses can go forward. But in that conversation, you also talked about some kind of multiple taxations that they have to deal with, and this multiple taxation has been a problem, not just within the business environment, but also when they need to even transport their goods from one point to the other. You have multiple road taxes. You see the local government agents out there with asking you for one receipt. You have one, they said no, you don't have this one. Everybody's looking like to grab from the small businesses. When these new governments come in, how do you think they can go about ensuring implementation? Earlier today, someone talked about the laws that we have in the country. If they can be followed as they are, without necessarily amending it, we might actually have a better business environment in Nigeria. But what do you think?
Thank you very much. I think that some of the quick wins that the incoming government can put in place is to provide some shield, from this multiple taxation issue, empower SME associations, empower the consumer protection bodies so that we can have whistleblowing policies so that SMEs who are being affected can get some respite immediately. And the federal government should also roll out some tax incentives. For instance, I heard NAFDAC, publishing something recently that they were going to stop recurrent, renewal fees for SMEs who had products, where the license needed to be renewed. So that is awesome. So we need a lot more initiatives like that from NAFDAC and from other agencies. FIRS, I would say, is really doing well now, because I almost fell off my chair, last year when I was able to download my tax clearance for 2 companies from the comfort of my office. This is moving away from where we had a long thing, of writing letters and following up over months to get a tax clearance certificate, to a situation where we access the Tax Pro Max, we can see our withholding tax deductions, we can pay VAT, and we can also download the tax clearance certificate. So we need more of that. Some agencies to come up with those online solutions, the business facilitation, and things that can make work faster for us as SMEs. We need that.
We have just less than a minute to wind down, and we have a strength in our nation, Nigeria, besides our population, our youth and the women. We're very entrepreneurial. I mean, I've seen women handle businesses from the scratch, and they've built it all the way up in spite of the challenges. So how can we empower these our strengths to even yield better for us?
So we need deliberate policies, we need quotas, we need more awareness, we need to get more women into agencies now, because, we've finished with the elections, and even from the last Senate, you saw only 6.4% in the Senate, 3.1% in House of Assembly. So we need to get women into positions in government. And where do you find these women? Go to the professional associations. You want someone for drug control, you go to Pharmaceutical Society. You want somebody in engineering, go to NSE. You want somebody in innovation, come to us at ISN. We have women in communities, we have women groups. There's an association of Nigerian women business networks with 70, is a coalition of 70 women groups. Right. So these women are available, they're ready to serve. The youth are there with fresh ideas. People living with disability, we must be inclusive. Right. And we'll get, we'll stop running on 3 cylinders instead of 6 cylinders by bringing in diversity and inclusion.
I think that's a great place to land. You've heard that. So this is setting an agenda for the incoming governments at all levels, by the way, not just the presidents, but the governors. You've heard that. Let us bring all our brilliant minds and strengths on board so we can make it better for our nation. Madam Faye Williams, I'd like to thank you so much for your time, as well as Professor Akwan Ekpo. Thank you so much for your insights on the program as well.
Thank you.
So there you have it, the economy in focus. But we have a whole day ahead of us to implement some of these, and in fact, the coming months for the government. So let's make it
4 years.
4 years, right? So let's start early. All right, let's hit the ground running. But that's it from us here. It's been a pleasure having you aboard. I'm Kayode Okikulu.
It's been wonderful sharing your morning with us. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Koka.
Thank you. I'm Maokpe Ogun Yusuf.
And I'm Nel Taegbe. Have a nice day.